And in this lecture, I'm going to be talking to you about Active Directory users and computers. You're going to learn what it is as well as how to open and use the console. Active Directory users and computers, also known as Active Directory or AD for short, is a tool that is installed by default when a server has the Active Directory domain services role installed. In other words, when you're working with a domain controller, you can expect to see Active Directory installed on the server. Now, you can also install Active Directory by installing the remote server administration toolset or RSAT, but you will have to connect to a domain controller in order for that to work properly. Now, just as the name implies, Active Directory is a live directory or database that stores user accounts and their passwords, computers, printers, file shares, security groups, and their respective permissions. A group could be made up of users, computers, printers, or file shares. Now, the reason why we use groups within Active Directory is frequently for security purposes. Now, you can use AD and group policy together to assign specific permissions for objects within Active Directory. The purpose of Active Directory is to handle security authentication across the domain. It's very, very important. If you want to work in the IT field, you have to understand it. Now, one of the ways that AD does this is by only allowing authorized users to log on to the network. Active Directory also provides centralized security management of your network resources by storing things like the usernames and the passwords in one location instead of the administrator needing to store this information on each individual computer. Now, the most common task that you need to know how to do within Active Directory, and everybody does this, everyone who's worked with Active Directory knows how to do this, is reset user passwords and create or delete user accounts. For example, every time a new employee is hired at your company, they will need login credentials. Now, you will need to create their account and help them log in for the first time. And quite often, as we all know, people are going to forget their passwords and they're going to ask you to reset them. Now, if you do not have Active Directory, you would need to create a local user account on each computer in your company. Also, every time you had to reset a password for that user, you would need to do it on each computer that they had an account on. So here we're creating John and his passwords, and then if we have to reset the passwords, we have to go back to each computer and reset the password on all of them. You can see they're changing to red, representing the new password for that user account. Now, this example not only applies to user accounts, but other objects that can be stored within Active Directory, like computers, printers, file shares, and security groups. So in this example, we have the username John and his password stored on our domain controller, which has Active Directory, and all of those computers go to Active Directory and query the server for his password. So if you need to change it, you just change it in one spot on the domain controller, and we are good to go. Okay, so no more resetting his password 10 times over or 5 times over. Imagine if you had, 5,000 computers on your network and you had to reset a password for John. Well, you'd have to reset it 5,000 times, and that's crazy. A big waste of money, so we don't want to do that. All right, so now that you understand what Active Directory is, let's learn about the interface. Now, I'm logged into my domain controller here called IPDC01. IP standing for Instructor Paul, and DC standing for Domain Controller, and 01 standing for the first domain controller in my domain. Now, my domain is called instructorpaul.com because that's my website, and I just thought it would fit. So you need to be logged into your domain if you'd like to follow along, or you can just watch and see what I do. All right, so the way that we start Active Directory, or AD for short, is to click in Server Manager. We can select Tools, and we can choose Active Directory users and computers from this list here. Now, if you don't know how to open Server Manager, that's easy. Click the Start button, and it'll appear in the top left corner, Server Manager. Okay? So now the Active Directory users and computers console will appear. Now, this window looks like those other ones that you may have seen before if you're familiar with DNS or DHCP. On the left, we have our navigation pane, and on the right, we have the contents of our current location. Now, on the menu, we have File, Action, View, and Help. Now, within the File menu, you can either choose the Options or you can exit Active Directory. Within Options, you can delete any changes that you've made to the view of Active Directory users and computers. And of course, exit acts just like you'd expect it to. The action menu is the exact same menu that you'll get when you right click on an object within either the navigation or the contents pane. The view column allows you to quickly add or remove columns so that you can show or hide additional information as necessary. Most importantly, you can enable advanced features. And this viewing mode shows a lot of hidden and useful content that you would otherwise not be able to find. The filter options allows you to show or hide certain object types within the contents pane. Now this can be useful when you have several different object types, like we can see here, like if multiple users, multiple groups, multiple contacts, and say you're just looking for a particular computer, we can say show only the following type and we can check computer, and all the other type will be hidden. Okay, so we're not going to do that. We're going to click cancel. The Customize option allows you to further customize your view within the Active Directory Users and Computers console by showing or hiding different components. For most administrators, the default configuration will work just fine. All right, so I'm going to click OK. And under Help, this menu allows you to quickly access the help topics and the Tech Center website. You can also view the version of Microsoft Management Console, or MMC, and Active Directory Users and Computers. Most of the time, you're not going to be using this Help little tab here. If you're running into an issue, just go ahead and do yourself a favor and Google the issue. You'll probably get results a lot faster. Now below that, you will see several action buttons. First, you have navigational arrows, and this will allow you to quickly navigate forwards and backwards through the Active Directory structure. Next, you have several buttons that will change depending on what type of object you've selected. Now, general rule of thumb, if you hover over the buttons, you will get a tooltip telling you what each button does and what it is used for. Now, at the left side of the console, we can see our navigation pane. At the top, you're going to see saved queries in the name of your domain, which in my case is instructorpaul.com. Yours will likely be different. Now, saved queries is commonly ignored by many administrators. It allows you to quickly locate things like expired or locked out user accounts, or user accounts who have not logged in within the last 30 days, and more. As the name implies, you can create these searches and save them for later use. This can make redundant tasks much easier. Now, instructorpaul.com refers to the domain that Active Directory is servicing. You can right-click on the domain and complete several actions. First, we can delegate control of the domain. By default, there's a set of users and a set of groups that have control over this domain, and you can extend that by delegating control of the domain. You can also delegate control of particular OUs, but we may get into that more later. Now, the Find button allows you to locate objects within this domain. You can view this as a search button. Think of it like the Google of Active Directory. If you need to find something, you can right-click and choose Find, and you will be able to type in the name of what you're looking for. And you can see that here. So we could choose what kind of object that we're looking for, and we can choose where we want to search, and then we just type in the name that we're looking for and click Find Now. Okay? You may change domains by selecting the Change Domain option. Now, you would do this if you had a subdomain to instructorpaul.com, like lessons or courses.instructorpaul.com and the like. Okay? But we can see here, if I click Browse, I only have Instructor Paul. If I had a subdomain or a trusted domain, you would see them listed here. We can also change domain controllers, but since I only have one domain controller in my domain, again, you're only seeing the one ipdc01.instructorpaul.com. This is the only domain controller that I have up and running, so it's the only one we're going to see here. The Raise Domain Functional Level option is used to enable Active Directory features when you have multiple domain controllers on a network. Now, some features are only available when all of your servers are updated to the latest version available. For example, if you have a 2012 domain controller and a 2016 domain controller, both servicing the same network, your domain's functional level will be that of the 2012 domain controller, meaning that the server cannot use the new features of 2016, but only the features that are included in 2012. If you were to upgrade the 2012 server to the 2016, you could then raise your domain's functional level to enable the new features. If I click this option, I can see that my domain functional level is Windows Server 2016, since I do not have any older domain controllers on the network. The Operation Masters option allows you to choose which servers operate master roles, like the Schema Master, Domain Name Naming Master, Relative Identified or ID Master, Primary Domain Controller Emulator, also known as PDC Emulator, and the Infrastructure Master. If you have multiple domain controllers on your network, you can choose what server has what roles. Now, this is something you would need to do when you remove a domain controller from the network. Now, Active Directory Domain Services is a multi-master enabled database, which means several domain controllers can make changes to the database. Allowing multiple domain controllers to write changes to the database can sometimes cause conflicting updates to occur. Now, this is where Operation Master steps in to resolve this issue by only allowing certain domain controllers to make changes to certain parts of Active Directory Domain Services. Now, since we don't have any additional domain controllers, we can click the change button, but there's no other domain controllers on the network to transfer the roles to. So we're going to click OK and we'll click close. Now, if we right click, we have the new option here, and we can do all kinds of things like create computers, users, groups, all that. We're going to get into that more. So under here, we have all tasks. Again, it's kind of a repeat of what you see above. You can do the resultant set of policy, which allows you to see what kind of group policy objects are being applied to this domain or whatever object you're clicking on. We're going to get into more of that later again. If we choose properties, we can see the domain name, and we can see the description, and we can see who it is managed by. None of this information is very important. It's just information that if you want to provide it to other people within your domain, other administrators, you can do that right here. Okay. So now I'm going to close out of this window. And that is all we're going to cover in this lecture. So now you have a basic understanding of what Active Directory is, that you're on a computer or a server that has Active Directory, or it has the Active Directory toolset installed, which is called RSET, so Remote Server Administration Toolset. Now, if you have RSET installed, you still need to be connected to a server that has the Active Directory Domain Services installed, okay? So what I'm going to do is hit the Start button here, and I'm going to search for the PowerShell ISE. And we could do either one that we'd like. I prefer the PowerShell ISE because it gives me the ability to write a script, and I can also use the command prompt below, okay? So the first thing we're going to do, since we're working with Active Directory, is import the Active Directory module. So import AD module. Of course, we're going to make a comment so we'll know what's going on. So import module, and then we're going to say Active Directory, all one word. I can just press tab and autocomplete that. And next, we're going to create the AD user. And if you remember, we can type in the get dash command, and we could do star dash AD and start, and we'll get all the commands that are related to Active Directory. So if we look through here, we'll find a command called new AD user, which is right here. So we're going to use this new AD user command. Now we can also type in get dash help new dash AD user, and we can see how this command is supposed to be run. So we can see the name here and the syntax. So we're specifying the name, account expiration date if we wanted to, and so forth. So change password at long on, all this kind of information. So what we're going to do is type in new dash AD user, and I'm going to show you a trick. We could type this all as one long line. The text would go off the screen and it would just get a little bit hard to manage. You can hit the button to the left of 1. I'm not exactly sure what this is called off the top of my head. If I hold shift, it's the tilde, but if I just press the key, it gives me this little character right here, and it's to the left of my 1 key and above tab on my keyboard. So if I press that, I can continue the script on the next line. So I'm just going to press enter, and I'm going to press tab, and I'm going to continue the script. So we're going to specify the name, which we can see that down here. So name. And then in quotation marks, I'm going to write the user's name. So we're going to call this, we're going to go with Bradley Beal. Okay, so I'm going to hit this character, and I looked it up, and it's called the grave accent. So I'm going to hit a grave accent, and I'm going to press enter. And now we're going to specify their first name, which is referred to as the given name. So given name would be just their first name, Bradley. We're going to do the grave accent, and we're going to say surname, which is the last name, and that'll be Beal. Again, another accent. And now we need to specify the username. So that is user principal name, just like that. Remember, you can use tab auto completion. So user principal name, I like to use first dot last. So Bradley.Beal in quotation marks. And we're going to hit a space and then do the grave accent. Now we need to type in the account password. And this is not as simple as you would think it would be. We do account password. We can't just type in something like this. We have to convert it to a secure string. So we can do that by typing in the command convert to secure string right there at the bottom. And then we're going to do in quotation marks P, and then I have to match the security requirements for my domain. So password, I'm going to spell it like that, 1, 2, 3, and end quotation marks, and we're going to do as plain text, and we're going to say force. Now, since we're doing these operators, and this is for the actual convert to string, and it's not for the account password, it's going to confuse the new AD user command. So we need to wrap this inside of parentheses. So PowerShell will look at this all as one unit, okay? Now we're going to hit space and do the grave accent again. And we're going to specify the path. Now, if you remember, there's a couple ways to get the path. The easiest way is to open Active Directory. So I'm in Server Manager. I'm going to hit Tools, Active Directory, Users, and Computers. And I'm going to right click on the desired OU that I want, which is under instructorpaul.com, instructorpaul, and domain users. So I'll right click and I'll choose Properties. I'll go to the Attribute Editor and I will select the distinguished name and I'll copy this text. Now, if you don't see the Attribute Editor, it's because under View, you don't have Advanced Features enabled. So you have to go to View, Advanced Features, and then you'll be able to get the distinguished name of your organizational unit. Okay, so the distinguished name is going to be the path. So inside of quotation marks, I'm going to paste that distinguished name. And we're going to do another grave accent. And then change password at logon. I'm going to set that to 1. And then we're going to do another grave accent. And finally, we're going to say enabled is 1. So we could either do a 0, we could do a 0 or a 1, or we could also do true, or we could say false like that. So, but I'm just going to use the 1 to say that it's going to be enabled. So now if I hit play, it'll run this script and it'll attempt to create the new Active Directory user. So I'm going to hit play, and we can see that it executed the command. So let's check Active Directory and see if it was created. Now, we don't see the user account yet, but we need to refresh the page. So I'm going to hit refresh, and there we can see Bradley Beal has been created. Okay, so now if I delete this account, we can do things like, obvious things. We could, for example, create it as not being enabled. Also, if we don't specify the enabled option, and if we just hit play, we can see the account will be created, but it will be disabled by default. So the default for new Active Directory users who are created with PowerShell is to be disabled. So if you don't specify specifically that you want it to be enabled, it will come through as not being enabled. Now, the reason why this is helpful is we could make a script that would have the user type in a first name, last name, and then just create the user account. I'll show you how to do that. First, we would want to grab some variables. So up here, I'm going to make a comment and say, grab variables from user. Next, we're going to assign some variables. So we're going to say first name equal to read-host. And then we're going to say a prompt, and we're going to say, please enter the first name. Okay, so the first name variable is going to be assigned to the value that the user will input because we're reading the host, and we're going to prompt the user to enter the first name. Let's copy this line, paste it, and we'll change this to last name. So last name is equal to, and then we're going to say, please enter the last name. Now, if we go down to our new AD user string and we just swap this out to first name space last name, put that in quotation marks, that will echo the variable first name and echo the variable last name. And then we change the given name to be first name. Now, the given name does not need to be wrapped in quotation marks like this does because there's no space. All right. Now, the surname is going to be just last name. And then the user principal name will be just like the name. It'll be first name dot last name. Okay, so now if we run this script, we can see that we're prompted to please enter the first name. So if I just type in auto, go with another Wizards player, auto porter, press enter, it then created the Active Directory user. So if I refresh it here, there's auto porter. We can run it again and just make up another name. Mark Shelton, press enter, and now we have our Mark Shelton user account. Okay, so that is why creating user accounts within PowerShell might be a good idea for you. Later, we can talk about creating users with CSV files, but I'm not going to cover that right now. Okay, so now that we've got this script, I'm going to hit File and Save As. And I'm going to save it to my desktop, and we'll just call it create AD user. And I'll click save. And I'll close out of this PowerShell prompt. And now I can just select, it's a little bit hard to see because my desktop's white. I can right click on create AD user and say run with PowerShell. And let's see, I can just type in a name, whatever I want. Whatever, we'll just, whatever. And then if I go to Active Directory refresh, there's that user account. And of course I can modify the script so that the user account would be enabled and not be disabled by default. But I hope you found this lecture useful. Great job getting through it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Get-host